Have you ever noticed how tired your soul feels? Even when your calendar is full of routines meant to improve you, you meditate, journal, eat the right foods, read the right books, and speak the right affirmations. You chase after your best self with the determination of a soldier and the exhaustion of a pilgrim who forgot why he started walking. But late at night, when all the voices quiet down, the podcasts, the coaches, the rituals, there's a whisper inside you that says, I don't want to be better. I just want to feel real. This is the quiet suffering behind self-improvement burnout. Not because you've done something wrong, but because you've believed in a lie, the lie of perfection. Modern culture sells it like oxygen. Be flawless. Upgrade yourself. Crush your goals. Even healing has become a performance. Even spirituality has been turned into a checklist, and somewhere in that endless loop of improvement, you start to disappear, piece by piece, until the only thing left is a carefully crafted version of you that feels hollow. Perfection is seductive because it promises love. If you can just become perfect, no one will leave you, no one will reject you, you will finally be enough. But that's not love. That's control, disguised as worth. Jung saw this myth long before it had a hashtag. He called it a betrayal of the self, because the self, your deepest truth up, is not perfect. It is whole. And to be whole means to carry both the divine and the damaged, the light and the shadow. Trying to live only in the light makes you blind, because the shadow doesn't disappear when ignored. It grows. When you aim for perfection, you split yourself in two. You create a war within, the you that is allowed to be seen and the you that must be hidden at all costs. And every morning you wake up and put on your armor, smile polished, words filtered, feelings edited. But there's a cost, not just fatigue, but a deeper grief. The grief of never being fully met by life. Because even you aren't meeting yourself. You might recognize this grief. It shows up as frustration that never ends, shame that clings even after progress, and an invisible pressure pressing down on your chest. This is not failure. This is the soul whispering, I miss me. And the tragedy is, most people don't burn out because they're weak. They burn out because they've spent years trying to become someone they were never meant to be. You weren't born to impress. You were born to embody your truth, your contradictions, your humanity. Perfection is sterile. It leaves no room for the mess of being human, no room for grief, for doubt, for trembling hands, or for laughter through tears. But your soul was never meant to be clean and smooth. It was meant to be alive, to bleed, to break, to bloom. There's a quiet revolution happening in those who are exhausted by the endless pursuit of better. They are beginning to ask different questions. Not, how can I fix myself? But, what if I don't need fixing? Not, how can I reach the ideal version of me? But, who am I underneath the need to improve? This is where the myth begins to crack. And through the crack, something ancient breathes again. The self, raw, unpolished, untamed, longing not for perfection but for presence. It is in this very place of imperfection that life begins to whisper truths you forgot, that tears are sacred, that confusion is part of wisdom, that being seen in your mess is more healing than being admired for your polish. The path forward is not another strategy, it's a homecoming, not to the new you, but to the you that was buried beneath the pressure to always evolve. In this homecoming, you begin to feel something unfamiliar, a softness, a kind of gentleness toward your own being, a quiet acceptance that maybe, just maybe, you are already enough. You've been trying so hard to become whole that you forgot wholeness begins the moment you stop trying. And in that sacred stillness, perfection dies, and the soul finally breathes. You wear the mask so well, you forget it's a mask, the one who always has the answer. The one who reads, learns, grows, heals, inspires. The one others admire for being so conscious and so evolved, shall we, so together. But inside, there's a quiet ache, a restlessness that no amount of progress silences. You've climbed the mountain of personal growth, only to find the summit is lonely. Because the higher you go, the more you feel you can't come down. You've become a prisoner of your own persona, the polished version of yourself that everyone praises, but few truly know. This persona isn't fake. It was born from something real, a desire to survive, to belong, to protect yourself from the chaos of your inner world. But the problem is, it's only half of you. The other half, the one that trembles, rages, doubts, fails, has been exiled in the name of growth. Jung called this the shadow, not because it's evil, but because it's unseen, not because it's dangerous, but because it's unloved. Every time you suppress a part of yourself to be better, that part doesn't disappear. It waits, in silence, in shame, in the locked drawers of your unconscious. You can dress it up in spiritual language. You can reframe it as lessons or lower vibrations. But beneath all the terminology, the truth remains. You're afraid of your own depth. Not the light, that's easy. That's celebrated. But the wild, the raw, the inconvenient truth of your being. You were told to rise, but not how to root. To transcend, but not how to descend. And so you became an expert at bypassing pain instead of integrating it. You learned how to analyze emotions rather than feel them. You became so good at performing wholeness that you lost touch with what wholeness actually is. Wholeness is not the absence of flaws, it is the embrace of all that you are, especially the parts you hide to be accepted. That's why so many seekers feel more alone after years of self-work. Because the deeper you go without accepting your shadow, the further you drift from your core. You build temples on unstable ground. You plant seeds of healing in soil that's never been truly touched. And then you wonder why your breakthroughs feel hollow, why the peace never lasts, why the same wounds keep echoing back in different forms. It's not because you're broken, it's because you've mistaken performance for presence. You've mistaken becoming for being. The shadow doesn't want to ruin your life. It wants to be seen, it wants to be held. It wants to be told you belong here too. When you reject the shadow, you also reject your full humanity, and that rejection becomes the lens through which you see the world. You begin to divide people into categories, enlightened or unconscious, healed or toxic, high vibration or low. But life is not that binary. Every soul is a mosaic of stories, wounds, longings, and contradictions, including yours. And when you allow the shadow back into your heart, something unexpected happens. You soften. You stop judging yourself for still being messy after all this time. You stop needing to explain or justify your emotions. You begin to trust that your humanity is not an obstacle to growth. It is the path. Jung didn't want us to become perfect beings. He wanted us to become whole beings, capable of standing in the light without denying the dark. Because only then can you live from truth. Only then can you look in the mirror and say, there I am, all of me. And that perhaps is the most radical form of growth. Not changing who you are, but loving who you've always been. Even the parts that cry in silence. Even the ones that still ache for something unnamed. Especially those. The unconscious is not your enemy. It is not a dark force plotting against your dreams. It is the hidden architect of your life, shaping your choices, your patterns, your longings from behind the veil. And yet, we live most of our days as if the unconscious doesn't exist. We think our failures are due to poor habits. We think our sadness can be solved by positive thinking. We think we are fully in control, as long as we keep trying harder. But the truth is sobering. You are not just who you think you are. Beneath your conscious mind, beneath your affirmations, your routines, your goals, lives a vast and mysterious territory, a place where your earliest wounds live on, untouched. Where forgotten desires whisper in the dark, where your shadow builds altars with the parts of you you've disowned. Jung called this realm the unconscious, not because it is separate from you, but because you have not yet brought it into the light of awareness. And here lies the paradox of self-improvement. The more you strive to improve only the visible self, the one who acts, thinks, performs, the more power you give to the invisible forces beneath. You may believe you're working on yourself, but if the work is disconnected from the unconscious, it becomes surface-level polishing of a deeper unrest, like painting over a cracked wall while the foundation crumbles. You can meditate for hours and still be driven by childhood abandonment. You can say you've forgiven and still be ruled by rage you've never dared to feel. You can look successful on the outside, and yet feel a quiet despair that has no name. That despair is the voice of the unconscious. It speaks not through words but through patterns, through relationships that repeat, through dreams that disturb, through behaviors you can't explain, through illnesses that have no cause. It does not care about who you want to be. It reflects who you truly are, until you have the courage to meet it. And meeting it requires more than self-help strategies. It requires descent, a journey inward, a surrender to the parts of you that terrify you. Not to destroy you, but to complete you. Because until the unconscious is made conscious, as Jung warned, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. The unconscious holds the keys to your freedom, not by offering perfection, but by offering truth. And truth is not always beautiful. Sometimes it shows you that your strength was built on fear, that your positivity is a mask for grief, that your growth is really avoidance, dressed in noble clothes. But in that raw confrontation, something shifts. You stop trying to fix yourself and begin to feel yourself. You stop editing your emotions and start listening to them. You begin to see that the parts you were most ashamed of are the ones most in need of love. The unconscious is not a monster to be slain, it is a wounded child waiting to be held. And when you hold it, not with judgment, but with compassion, you begin to reclaim your inner world. You begin to see that your darkness is not a flaw but a source, that your pain is not a weakness but a teacher, that your limitations are not blocks but invitations to come home to yourself. In a world obsessed with control, this is a radical act, to trust the wisdom of what lies beneath, to stop conquering your inner world and start communing with it, to become intimate with the mystery inside you. This is where real transformation lives, not in performance, not in perfection, but in presence, in the quiet space where the unconscious rises, not to sabotage you, but to show you who you truly are. Not a project to be improved, but a soul to be remembered. You stand in front of the mirror and something feels off. You've done the work, the routines, the therapy, the reading, the mindset shifts, the meditations, but something in your reflection still doesn't feel like you. It's not that you see a stranger, it's that you see a version of yourself that has been carefully constructed, polished, curated, safe, and yet, behind the eyes, there's a crack, thin, quiet, but undeniable. A fracture between the image and the essence. This is the mirror trickled by the myth of perfection. At first glance, it looks whole, beautiful even, but as you get closer, you realize the glass has lines, subtle breaks where your truth is trying to emerge. You've been trying to tape it together with affirmations and achievements, thinking that if the reflection looks good enough, you'll finally feel whole. But mirrors don't lie, and this one is starting to show you the truth. You've mistaken the surface for the soul. Perfection is a mirror that demands your silence. It doesn't want your grief. It doesn't want your rage. It doesn't want your messy, tangled, complicated heart. It wants symmetry, smoothness, consistency. But the soul is not smooth. The soul is wild. It curves where it shouldn't. It remembers things your mind has forgotten. It cracks open when logic says it should stay closed. And maybe that's where the suffering comes from, trying to contain something infinite inside a structure meant to impress others. You've been holding your breath, hoping that one more breakthrough, one more goal, one more step up the ladder will finally make the image in the mirror feel real. But the mirror can't give you what it doesn't hold. It reflects the outside. It cannot reflect the unseen. The tragedy is that many people spend their entire lives polishing their mirror, never realizing that it's not the glass that holds their truth. It's the crack, the broken edge, the imperfection, the scar that no filter can erase. That's where the soul slips through, not in the image that pleases others, but in the one that finally tells the truth that you are tired of pretending, that you are aching for softness, that you are more than what people see. There's a kind of beauty that only appears in things that have been broken. The Japanese call it kintsugi, the art of mending cracks with gold. They don't hide the break, they highlight it, because they understand. The wound is part of the story. The flaw is where the light enters. Maybe your soul has been trying to show you this all along. In the anxiety that rises when you try to be perfect. in the sadness that lingers after applause, in the quiet knowing that something essential has been left behind, that something is your truth, not the edited version, not the elevated self, but the raw, trembling, unfiltered essence of who you are, behind the roles, beyond the image, beneath the performance. And when you stop trying to glue the mirror back together, something unexpected happens. You begin to see through it. You see the child who learned to perform in order to be loved. You see the adult still chasing that love in subtle ways. You see the cost of chasing an identity rather than inhabiting your existence. And then, perhaps for the first time, you stop looking at your reflection and start looking inward, not to judge, not to fix, but to reclaim, to retrieve the pieces of yourself that you left behind in your pursuit of being enough, because you were never broken. You were only taught that your cracks were something to hide. But what if your cracks were sacred? What if they were the map? Not the evidence of your failure, but the doorway back to your soul. This is not a poetic metaphor. This is the very real turning point between burnout and belonging. Not belonging to others, belonging to yourself. When you stop fearing the cracks and start honoring them, the mirror becomes irrelevant. You no longer need to see a perfect reflection. You begin to feel a deeper truth. I am real. I am whole. I am already enough. Not because the world says so, but because your soul remembers who you were before you were told to improve. You've spent years climbing, building, refining, trying to reach some version of yourself that finally feels like enough. And yet, the higher you go, the emptier it becomes. The accolades don't land, the healing doesn't hold, the victories feel strangely hollow, as if the one receiving them isn't quite you. There comes a moment in every seeker's life, a quiet, breaking moment, when the striving collapses. Not from failure, but from sheer exhaustion. You've tried everything, you've followed the rules, you've been disciplined, hopeful, committed. You've done the inner work, the shadow work, the rituals, the surrender, and still, something is missing. Not because you've done it wrong, but because you've been seeking in the wrong direction. You've been trying to become someone better. Jung's work invites you to become someone truer. This is not the same path. It doesn't take you upward. It brings you inward. Individuation, the heart of Jung's psychology, is not about evolving into a perfect being. It's about becoming whole. And wholeness is not shiny. It is raw, messy, contradictory, real. It means making peace with the parts you swore you'd outgrow. It means facing the wounds that never fully closed. It means holding space for the grief that still rises when no one is watching, and not trying to fix it, but listening to it, letting it speak, because the soul does not respond to force, it responds to honesty. True transformation doesn't come when you become more disciplined. It comes when you become more honest, painfully, beautifully honest, about what hurts, what you fear, and what you long for underneath the performance. What if you stopped trying to heal as a means to become worthy? What if you started trusting that your wounds are already part of your wholeness? There is no finish line in the journey inward, no moment where you arrive and say, I am finally perfect. But there is a moment when you stop running. When you sit with yourself just as you are and feel the terrifying, exquisite truth. I am not broken, I am becoming. This becoming is not linear. It spirals. It revisits old pain with new eyes. It breaks you open in places you thought were already healed. And every time it does, you're invited deeper. Not deeper into suffering, but deeper into soul. You learn to stop rejecting your emotions as problems. You learn to hold your mess as sacred. You begin to realize the parts of you that don't fit the image are often the most alive. Individuation is not an achievement. It's a surrender. It's allowing the self, your deepest truth, to rise, even when it contradicts your plans, even when it ruins your perfect image, even when it asks you to walk away from things that once defined you. And it's not glamorous. It often looks like loneliness. Quiet evenings where you question everything. Nights where the only thing you can feel is the rawness of being alive without answers. But in those moments, something ancient awakens, a clarity that doesn't need validation, a presence that no longer performs, a knowing that your value was never in becoming someone else, but in coming home to yourself. You stop chasing peace as a destination and begin to feel it in your bones. Not because everything is fixed, but because you're finally telling the truth. You are no longer at war with yourself. You are no longer chasing a version of you that doesn't exist. You are learning to love what is. The scars, the softness, the silence, the parts that cry, the parts that don't know, the parts that are still learning to trust. This is the radical power of individuation. It doesn't make you superior, it makes you real. And in a world addicted to performance, being real is revolutionary. Because when you stop trying to be perfect, you give others permission to do the same. You become a mirror, not of idealism, but of authenticity. Not someone who has it all together, but someone who is willing to stand in the truth of their own becoming. And in that presence, something beautiful happens. The soul breathes, the heart softens, and the endless noise of not being enough begins to fade. Not because the world changed, but because you did. You chose to return to the body, to the breath, to the unpolished truth, to the place where healing is not an achievement, but a remembering. So now I ask you, what would happen if you stopped trying to be perfect and simply allowed yourself to be whole? What would your life feel like if you no longer had to perform your worth? Who might you become if you gave yourself permission to rest, to feel, to be? Maybe the real healing doesn't begin when you become stronger, but when you become softer. Maybe the peace you've been chasing isn't found at the end of a checklist, but in the quiet moment you finally say to yourself, I am enough, as I am, right now. You are not behind, you are not broken, you are not failing. You are returning to your center, to your essence, to your soul. Let this be the moment where the striving ends and the becoming begins. As Carl Jung said, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. And if this video spoke to something deep inside you, I invite you, leave a comment below. Where in the world are you watching from? And what part of this message touched your soul? If this brought light to your path, consider leaving a super thanks. It helps us keep creating content that heals, awakens, and connects. And don't forget to subscribe and watch the next video appearing on your screen now. Your journey inward is just beginning. We'll meet again soon, not in perfection, but in presence. Until then, keep returning home,